Yo, what's up guys, Alpha, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to get rank 1 with on the arena ladder. And now before I get into it, there's going to be an MTG zone link down in the description. If you click on that, it'll have the full deck list there that you can import into arena if you want to try the deck out for yourself. And I'm also in the process of writing a full text article about this deck that will have more details, a full sideboard guide, how I change the deck for best of one, and a few tips and tricks to help you play the deck as well. So as soon as that's finished, I'll link that down in the description as well. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my Cabaret Revels Jund Sacrifice deck in Historic. So, as the name suggests, the big difference between this deck and all the other sacrifice decks that you can play in Historic is it's running Cabaret Revels. So this is a 3-mana enchantment. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you seek a creature card with lesser mana value and put it onto the battlefield. So typically Cabaret Revels decks, there are a few things that are important to make this work, especially in Historic, because the thing is with Revels, you need it to be really efficient in your deck, because taking a turn off to play this, which essentially does nothing the turn you play it, in a format as fast as Historic, can be really bad if you don't capitalize on it immediately. So first of all, you need your deck to be full of creatures that synergize well with each other, so that the turn after you play the Revels, after you've taken your turn 2 or 3 off to play it, you're immediately getting really good value off it straight away to make up for that tempo loss that you get of just doing nothing for 3 mana the turn you play it. Second of all, you also need to make sure that you have really good quality 1-drops, because with Revels you need to have a pretty evenly split curve or it doesn't really work out too well. And so whenever you cast a 2-mana creature, it's guaranteed to hit a 1-mana creature, and you're also likely to hit your 1-mana creatures when you play more expensive stuff as well. So you need to ensure that your 1-mana creatures are good quality as well. And additionally, you want to be running a deck that just wants to have a high density of creatures on the battlefield to really take advantage of the Revels. And sacrifice decks are the perfect decks for all of those things, really, because sacrifice decks have some of the best quality 1-drops in the whole game. They synergize super well with each other, and Sacrifice is also a deck that really wants to have a high density of creatures on the battlefield at any time to sacrifice them to their synergies. The main reason why I didn't build Sacrifice immediately after Revels came out, this is one of the first decks that I thought of when I was building around Revels, was because Cat Oven Trail was still viable and still probably the best way to play Sacrifice, so it didn't really feel worth it playing a Revels build when you could run Cat Oven Trail. But with the recent nerf of Cauldron Familiar, I don't think it's worth running the food package anymore, and so I think now is the time for Revels to really step in and fill that role, if that makes sense. So I'll start off by having a look at the cheaper creatures. So we got 4 copies of Unlucky Witness and 4 copies of Gilded Goose. So Unlucky Witness, 1 mana 1/1, and when it dies, we exile the top 2 cards of our library until our next end step we may play one of those cards. So this is a card that we're always happy to see. If we hit it off Revels, it's great because it's just really good sacrifice fodder that ensures that we don't run out of gas, can help us hit land drops in the early game, and just make sure that we, even though Revels does work as a card advantage engine, Unlucky Witness also kind of works as a way to ensure that we don't run out of gas. So this is a card that we're always happy to see if we hit it off a Revels, because it is just the best sack fodder. One thing to note with this is that you only get the cards until your next end step. So say you have to tap out in order to sacrifice it, say you've got a Priest of Forgotten Gods and you have to tap out to play another creature. If you don't have the mana to spend, then you can't play the cards if you do it during your turn, but if you sack it during your opponent's turn, you get it until your next end step, and if you leave open mana, then you can play the cards that you get off it as well. One other thing to note with Unlucky Witness is you want to make sure that if you are going to sacrifice it, you sacrifice it before you play your land for the turn, in case you hit lands off the Unlucky Witness that you can play off it. So Witness, really good at just ensuring you don't run out of gas, always a good card to have, and just some of the best sacrifice fodder as well. Then we've got 4 copies of Gilded Goose, so even though we're not running Trail of Crumbs and Witch's Oven, this is still a really good part of the deck because, first of all, it provides ramp, which is really important. As you can see, we have a pretty high density of 3-drops, so being able to go Goose on turn 1 into one of our 2-drops on turn 3, one of our 3-drops on turn 2 is really important, especially Revels. Getting Revels down on turn 2 is so, you get so far ahead on tempo by doing that. Outside of that, it also fixes your mana, which is really nice, as opposed to something like Llanowar Elves, which doesn't do that. It provides the food, which we can sacrifice to enable our sacrifice synergies like Mayhem Devil and Korvold, and it's also just a regular source of life gain and a mana sink in the late game as well. So even though we're not running Trail of Crumbs, Gilded Goose is really good at allowing us to ramp, especially since we have 4 copies of Korvold as well, fixing our mana, producing some life gain, and just having stuff on the battlefield with the food tokens that we can sacrifice to our other abilities as well. Then at the 2-drop slot, we've got 4 copies of Priest of Forgotten Gods. So this is the card that hasn't really seen play in the sacrifice decks for a while now, and that's because typically most sacrifice decks have been focused around non-creature spells like Deadly Dispute, Meathook Massacre, Trail of Crumbs. In this particular deck, since we're taking advantage of Cabaret Revels, it's important that most of our payoffs in the deck are creatures, so that we have a high density of creatures to cast to trigger the Revels, and we also have a high density of creatures in the deck that we can hit off the Revels. So Priest of Forgotten Gods makes a lot of sense to be running in this deck, because we can play Priest and get a creature off the Revels, which then enables us to, you know, have an extra creature that we can sacrifice to the Priest, and it also enables us to dig for the Priest if we play a more expensive card. You know, say we cast a Mayhem Devil and hit a Priest, that's really solid, because then next turn we can activate the Priest, force the opponent to sacrifice stuff, and start generating card advantage and mana. So Priest, obviously the downside of it is that you can't activate it the turn you play it, but if it survives a turn cycle against another creature deck, it's just going to start picking apart the opponent's board, especially if you have a Mayhem Devil alongside it. So Priest, really nice as a way to pick apart the opponent's board that keeps the cards flowing, also produces an extra bit of mana which allows us to ramp into Korvold or potentially cast multiple spells in a turn if we have Revels in play, which is really strong. So Priest is just a really nice payoff for running Revels, and also just a good way to pick the opponent's board apart if you're playing against a creature deck. Next up, we got 4 copies of Prosperous Innkeeper. So 2 mana 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, we create a treasure token, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control, we gain a life. So this is really nice because it allows us to ramp. You know, we've got 4 Korvold at the top end, so having Innkeeper allows really nice curve outs where we can play Innkeeper on 2, Revels on turn 3, and then we can play Korvold on turn 4, for example. The treasure token is nice because we can sacrifice it to trigger Mayhem Devil. You know, similar to Priest of Forgotten Gods, it also enables us to potentially cast multiple spells in a turn, which is really strong if we have a Revels in play, because we can get multiple Revels triggers off it. And the life gain that we get off this is just really nice at being able to stabilize as well. You know, if we're against an aggressive deck, Innkeeper is just really solid at gaining us a bunch of life. And even outside of that, there are a lot of other situations where just padding our life total can be nice as well. And then we've got 4 copies of Woe Strider. So this is another, you know, card that hasn't really seen much play in sacrifice decks for a little while. Again, because the old sacrifice decks, like the Golgari food decks, were more focused around non-creature spells. Since we're running a Revels build, we want to be running a high density of creatures, and Woe Strider is really, really solid in this deck. It's so good. So it produces a 0/1 when it enters the battlefield, but the key thing here is that it has a free sacrifice outlet, so we can sacrifice a creature at instant speed without having to pay any mana to scry 1, which is just really good at smoothing out our draws, but it's also just insane in conjunction with Mayhem Devil. If we have Mayhem Devil and Woe Strider in play, we can just deal a bunch of direct damage to the opponent, so it gives us really good reach in the late game, but it also allows us to just pick off the opponent's creatures fairly easily as well. And in conjunction with Cabaretti Revels, we can get so many creatures in play very quickly, which gives us a bunch of Woe Strider triggers if we need them. And the ability for it to be escaped from the graveyard is really, really strong as well, you know, especially in conjunction with Cabaretti Revels. You know, if you're against a control deck, for example, or just a deck with a bunch of interaction, even if they pick apart your board, we can then just keep escaping Woe Strider, and every time we cast it from the graveyard, it still triggers Cabaretti Revels, so then we get more creatures in play. So Strider, really good on rate, really good for what we want in general, and the fact it's a recursive threat is really powerful as well. Next up, we have Mayhem Devil. So this is kind of the centerpiece of the deck. We're running a very creature-based sacrifice deck, and Mayhem Devil is just perfect alongside cards like Priest of Forgotten Gods and Woe Strider, either picking apart the opponent's boards if they're playing creatures, or just dealing a bunch of direct damage to finish off the opponent as well. So Mayhem Devil, really the centerpiece of the deck in a lot of ways. And then finally, we've got 4 copies of Korvold Fakers, King at the top of the curve, and this is the card that just allows us to go way above, just go way over the top of whatever the opponent's doing. Korvold is just a generically great top end to a sacrifice deck, but it's even better in this deck because of Revels. You know, one of the disadvantages of Korvold is if you're ramping into it, you know, say we do play off Innkeeper, for example, if the opponents kill their other creatures and we play Korvold, we often end up having to sacrifice a land or another permanent that we might not want to sacrifice, whereas if we have Revels in play, we get to cast Korvold and seek a creature into play beforehand, so we're guaranteed to have a creature that we can sacrifice to it, and there are a bunch of great targets that we can hit. You know, we can potentially hit Gilded Goose, where we can just sacrifice a food, we can hit Unlucky Witness to exile the top 2 cards and play even more cards. So Korvold, just a really generically great card in general, but it becomes even better with Cabaretti Revels, and then if it survives and we can start drawing a bunch of cards, we can just go off even more with Cabaretti Revels. So Korvold, great top end. I do want to quickly address a few cards that I'm not running. One card that I did test for a little while was Yawgmoth. I was initially running a 2-and-2 split of Yawgmoth and Korvold, but I honestly wasn't too impressed with Yawgmoth overall. It is obviously a pretty powerful card, and it does synergize pretty well with Revels because you cast the Yawgmoth, get a creature into play which you can then use with the Yawgmoth, but I felt like it didn't run away with the game in the same way that Korvold did. Having to pay life to activate it was annoying against decks like Phoenix, where they're very pressuring on your life total in general. And there were just a lot of board states where you just kind of ran out of creatures before you really got to do with what you were trying to do. Whereas Korvold is a card that will just very quickly close the game out. That's the other thing about Yawgmoth, you know, it is very good against opposing creature decks, but against a deck like Control, for example, it's not great at actually closing the game out, whereas Korvold can really apply a bunch of pressure really quickly. Another card that I was running, but I ended up cutting, was Ravenous Squirrel. So when I was first thinking about running Revels and Sacrifice, I was thinking about potentially running a build where Squirrel was the only one drop, so you're guaranteed to hit it each time, which is really strong because Squirrel is such a generically powerful card. For a one drop, it's one of the best one drops in the format, I think, if you're able to efficiently trigger it. But the thing is with this deck, since we're a Priest of Forgotten Gods deck, there were so many situations where I had a priest and a squirrel, and I had to sacrifice the squirrel to the priest. I think in this particular build, you want all of your one drops to be happy to be sacrificed by the Priest of Forgotten Gods. My last build before I switched to this build was running Ravenous Squirrel in place of Fatal Push, but the issue in this particular build, since I'm not running Yawgmoth anymore, is that if you had Ravenous Squirrel in this slot, your only removal, your only interaction is Priest of Forgotten Gods, which Priest is obviously a very powerful card, but it's very vulnerable to removal. You have to make it survive a turn cycle before you even get to use it. If the opponent has chump blockers or smaller creatures and we don't have Mayhem Devil, they can just sacrifice them instead. And you can also lose to just creatures that outscale Priest, like, you know, Auras are very good at making really big creatures really quickly. A deck like Angels or even Is It Phoenix often play threats that you need to answer immediately, so I felt like Fatal Push was really necessary, and because of that, you know, Fatal Push is really strong in this deck because this is probably the deck where you can enable Revolt the easiest, so this is very consistently able to take out bigger creatures as well, and this deck is just absolutely insane against any creature deck, and I think that's really strong at the moment because with Golgari Food essentially being pushed out of the metagame, the one thing I've noticed is, outside of Control, which is still a deck, and probably the toughest matchup for this deck, but almost every other deck in the format is a creature-based deck in one way or another, and this deck just absolutely steamrolls all of them. The combination of the Sacrifice Shell, Korvold at the top end, Revels keeping you know, never running out of gas, and Fatal Push just being really efficient removal that is also really good in the late game because we can enable Revolt very easily, means that this deck just absolutely steamrolls all the creature decks in the format, whilst having a reasonable game plan against Control in the sideboard. I'll get to that in a second. We also get to run Gigantha as the companion. That's another advantage of not running Yawgmoth or Meathook Massacre. You know, Meathook Massacre was a very powerful card, but the main reason that one of the main reasons that you would run it against the creature decks was the life gain that it gave you. Now that's been nerfed, I'm not sure it's really worth running in this shell anyway, especially because we're a very creature-based deck. If you're running more non-creature spells like the old Golgari Food deck, then Meathook Massacre might still be appealing there, but since we're going to be committing a lot to the board, I don't think Meathook Massacre is great. But either way, since we're not running any double-coloured cards, we get to run Gigantha as the companion, which is really nice because we often have excess mana in this deck. You know, if we activate Priest and we don't have anything to use with the double black mana, we can often just put Gigantha into our hand. Especially with Revels, you know, if we're against a deck that has a lot of interaction, being able to just put Gigantha in our hand, cast it as a 5-mana card, and then potentially hit one of our 3-drops, or just ensure that we keep hitting value off Revels is really nice. And just having access to a 5/5 if we end up flooding out is really good. Just very efficient against decks that struggle to deal with the big creature, and also decks that interact with you a lot. Just gives you something to do if you do end up flooding out and they keep killing your creatures as well. Mana base wise, I've gone for 24 lands, which compared to most other sacrifice decks, that's quite a lot, but this deck's curve is quite a bit high. You know, we have 12 3-drops and 4 Korvold, so I felt like 24 has been necessary. I wanted to ensure that we had all the right colours of mana on time. You know, typically Sacrifice likes to run cards like Hive as a creature land, but we need black, red and green mana on turn 1, so there's a lot more pressure on the mana base in this particular build, which is why I've gone for 1 basic as a concession to Field of Ruin, and then just dual lands for the rest of the mana base, which has felt good. I think it's really important to ensure that you're hitting the right colours on time, and we have got 1 Phyrexian Tower, which I think the first copy of this in a deck that is running 4 Korvold is just really, really important, and just being able to work as a sacrifice outlet later in the game to trigger stuff like Mayhem Devil and Korvold as well is really nice. So 24 lands has felt good. I think if you go any lower than this, you start missing your 3rd land drop on curve, which just ends up losing you the game. So 24 lands has felt like a good amount to me. So that's the main deck. I've been super impressed with how well Revels has been working in this shell, and I think a lot of people, you know, like I said, with the nerfs to Golgari food, I think the format's become a lot more creature-centric, and this deck is super strong against the creature decks. And I also feel like people have started to cut their sacrifice hate out of their sideboard now as well, which is really strong. You know, I barely ever see Yasharn, which I'm not even sure is that good against sacrifice, because if you have a Fatal Push when they play it, you can just kill it immediately. And stuff like Hitotsuga Consumes All doesn't really hurt this deck because we have so many cards that cost more than 2, so more than 1 even. So I think this deck is really well positioned right now. If Control becomes more popular, then it might not be the best choice, because I have found Control to be quite a tough matchup, but against pretty much everything else in the format, this deck has felt really, really strong to me. So now onto the sideboard. Speaking of Control, we have quite a lot of cards in the sideboard, specifically for the Control matchup. So I've got 4 Tenacious Underdog and 4 of Nyxlis as my main cards against Control. So Tenacious Underdog, I really like this card. I think the big thing with this deck is, because of Revels, we want to make sure that we have a lot of creatures in the deck, and Tenacious Underdog is really good, specifically with Revels as well, because it's just a recursive threat and it's a haste threat as well, so we can use this to pressure the opponent's Planeswalkers by blitzing it. Even just playing it on turn 2, a 2-mana 3/2 is decent stats to start applying pressure with. If the opponent kills it and it's in the graveyard and we have a Revels in play, we can just repeatedly blitz it over and over again, trigger the Revels to hit more 1-drops. So Tenacious Underdog, really nice at being able to just get stats on the board in the early game, apply pressure, and then repeatedly attack with haste, which is really good at finishing off Planeswalkers if the opponent does play them as well. And then also got 4 copies of Nyxlis the Adversary. So I really like this card in Sacrifice against Control, because the main card that's problematic in this matchup is Farewell. You know, the big issue playing Control as opposed to an aggro deck is... the big issue playing Sacrifice against a Control deck as opposed to an aggro deck is that you don't close the game out as fast, which gives the opponent time to find stuff like Wandering Emperor, find stuff like Teferi, find stuff like Farewell, which is the biggest problem for this deck. And the really nice thing about Nyxlis is it's much more difficult for them to interact with, especially if you get the casualty off and you get both copies of Nyx into play. But the most important thing is it survives Farewell. If you weren't running Nyxlis and you were just running creatures and Thought Seizers, for example, you just can't beat Farewell at all. Whereas getting Nyxlis into play gives you a really good way to hedge against that. And again, like I said, it's really difficult for them to beat this, because they can make creature tokens off stuff like Wandering Emperor, but we're also going to be committing to the board, so it's very difficult for them to attack through. The only real answers they have are counter spells on the stack, which aren't great because we can get the casualty copy, or stuff like Fateful Absence, which only kills one of the copies anyway. So Nyxlis is really nice at applying pressure, attacking them from a different front so it doesn't get killed by sweepers like Farewell. And, you know, if we can get this down on turn 3, it's really difficult for them to beat. That's also another reason why I like running Tenacious Underdog, is because we want to ensure that we can casualty this as consistently as possible. And so when we're sideboarding against Control, I usually cut Fatal Push, Priest of Forgotten Gods, and then bring in Tenacious Underdog and Nyxlis. And if Tenacious Dog was something like a Thought Seize, there's actually, you know, a reasonable chance that we would have just Nyxlis on turn 3 and no creature to casualty it, which is kind of a nightmare. Whereas since we're running Tenacious Underdog, we can play Underdog on turn 2, attack for 3 damage, and then casualty it and get 2-3 loyalty Planeswalkers in play, which is really, really strong. So I really like Tenacious Underdog and Nyxlis against Control, and while the matchup is close and you're definitely unfavoured game 1, having access to these cards post sideboard makes the matchup a lot more manageable. Next up, we've got 2 copies of Outland Liberator. So this is here for any deck that has instances or artifacts that you, artifacts or enchantments that you want to be able to kill. So for example, against the Enchantress deck, it gives you an out to the 9 life Solemnity lock, which is really important. Against other sacrifice decks, if they're running Anvil, or if they're still running Witch's Oven, for example, we can use it to kill there. And this is also pretty good against control decks as well, because it gives us a way to kill stuff like Portable Hole, Hardcast Shark Typhoon, Search for Azcanta, for example. So Outland Liberator, really important card for those matchups. And if decks with artifacts or enchantments become more popular, I could potentially see running the 3rd copy of this instead of Maelstrom Pulse. Then next up, we've got 2 copies of Lantern and 1 copy of Unlicensed Her. So this is obviously here as Graveyard Hate. The main decks that we want this against are Is It Phoenix and Esper Greasefang. And I really like this split. I think the first copy of Unlicensed Hearse is really, really strong, but it does get diminishing returns. You know, the 2nd and 3rd copies don't really do much, which is why I've gone for Lantern. Lantern is a card that I think has fallen off generally, but I quite like it in this particular deck because it does have sacrifice synergies with stuff like Mayhem Devil and Korvold as well. So, great thing about Lantern is it's not a bad card to draw in multiples because you can just cycle it away to draw a card if you need. But I really like 3 pieces of Graveyard Hate. I think if a deck like Is It Phoenix or Esper Greasefang becomes even more popular, you could could potentially look at running a third lantern instead, but three pieces of Graveyard Hate has felt good for me in those matchups. And then lastly, we've got one copy of Maelstrom Pulse, so I like this here as just a catch-all answer, but specifically I felt like I needed to be running something to be able to kill Serra's Emissary, or just, you know, random threats that are difficult to deal with. I feel like just having a one-of is really important, because if we are against a deck like Creativity and they get an Emissary out, we can just get a Corvold into play and start, you know, filtering through our deck with Woe Strider, and just having this single copy of Maelstrom Pulse gives us an out to that at least. And also there are a lot of other matchups where you just bring it in, you know, matchups where you want a bit of an extra removal. Against a deck like the Enchantress deck, it gives us an additional out to be able to kill Solemnity in addition to Outland Liberator, so I just like this as just generic removal, kind of like a hedge in matchups where we just want an extra piece of interaction for random card types that aren't creatures. So that's the deck. It's felt super powerful to me. I've been trying out a bunch of Sacrifice Shells since Cat Oven got nerfed, because I feel like people are kind of overcorrecting to that a little bit. People are running a lot more creature decks, they're cutting the Sacrifice Hate from their sideboard, and this deck has definitely felt the best out of all the decks I've tried so far. Next up I've got some gameplay. I've got 5 matches that I was playing on the ladder. If you've got any questions about the deck at all, drop me a comment below, and I hope you enjoy the gameplay. Big up! Okay, sweet, here we go. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, this hand looks pretty decent. You know, we do need to hit our third land drop, but you know, we got Witness on turn 1, Innkeeper on turn 2. If we keep hitting lands, we can play Revels on turn 3, potentially into Corvold on turn 4, which would be really powerful. Okay, Lunarch Veterans, so probably Helioak combo, if I had to guess. So we'll run out Witness on turn 1 here. Did draw our third land, which is really important. You know, hitting our third land drop on curve is so important in this deck because we have so many important 3-drops. And we do have ways to ramp. You know, we've got Goose and Innkeeper that can help us bridge that gap, but they're only one-use ramp, so missing the third land drop is kind of devastating. So really happy to see that we hit it here. Innkeeper, okay, Authority is pretty annoying here. Okay, Priest is a nice draw, so you almost always want to be playing Priest on turn 2, because it's a card you want to be able to activate as fast as possible. So them having Authority here, okay, yeah, I was going to say if they have a Trelosaur or Voice of the Blessed, that's kind of scary. I'm very happy to see Blaststone here because it means that they don't have anything else to play, which allows us to, next time we can just play Mayhem Devil, activate the Priest, use the Devil to ping down the Veteran and the Innkeeper, and then they're forced to sacrifice the Voice of the Blessed. Had they had another 1-drop, it would have been pretty annoying because they could have saved the Voice, but thankfully things worked out pretty nicely here. Now unfortunately, I don't think there's anything that we can draw that will enable us to utilise the 2 mana that we get off Priest here, but that's not really a big deal. We get to basically clear off their whole board here, which is really sick. We'd love to see a land, obviously, because then next turn, you know, we could go Revels and then... okay, so obviously we don't get to use the cards that we hit off the Witness, but that's not a huge deal. We did draw our lands for next turn, which is really nice, so I think next turn we're probably interested in playing Revels, unless they play a creature that we need to kill, in which case we can just play double Innkeeper and then activate the Priest again. I mean, I guess we could play double Innkeeper and activate the Priest and play Revels, but if we put Revels into play first, then every Innkeeper we play, or each of the Innkeepers that we play, gets us another 1-drop. So, Ranger Captain, you know, it's not a card that we need to be dealing with urgently, really. So I think it's important to just get the Revels out here. Had they played a must-kill threat there, I think I would have gone for the Innkeepers to be able to activate Priest. Soul Warden... Okay, so they do kill the Priest. I was going to say Soul Warden is a little bit annoying, especially if they have a Trelosaur or a Voice of the Blessed, because then every creature that we play afterwards, you know, especially with Revels putting an extra creature in play, will trigger the Soul Warden alongside Authority, which will pump their Voice or Trelosaur really fast. But thankfully they don't have another Voice or Trelosaur on the battlefield, so we can afford to take this turn off, play the Corvold. I'm going to sack the Treasure here. I don't generally like sacking lands unless I have to, and I don't want to sack the Witness here because we won't be able to cast the cards that we hit off it. And since they have Authority in play, all of the creatures that we play are going to be entering tapped. So I think it's important to have Unlucky Witness available as a chump blocker so that we don't just get attacked down by this Ranger Captain. So we go down to 4 here, which is kind of low, but we do have 2 Innkeepers in our hand to start buffering our life total. And so I think I'm going to run those out first here, just to start gaining life, just to ensure that we don't get run down by their creatures. Because that is the one downside of Authority. You know, like I said, everything is going to be entering tapped, so we can't have stuff back on defense to block the turn we play it. But getting Innkeeper in play, you know, especially if we can get both of them in play, just really starts to buffer our life total, which is really nice. And again, thankfully, you know, this would be really, really scary if they had a Voice or Trelisara, because for every trigger, every creature that we put into play is going to would gain them 3 counters, which is really sketchy. Thankfully, they don't know. But we are interested in trying to kill these Soul Wardens as a priority, so that, you know, they could potentially have a Voice of Trelisara in hand, and so I really like killing them before they get the opportunity to grow it, because we don't have access to Fatal Push. You know, Fatal Push would be the card that we'd look to draw to kill a big Trelisara or Voice of the Blessed. Thankfully, Mayhem Devil allows us to start picking them off. We can sacrifice the treasure to play a Gilded Goose here, which then kills one of the Soul Wardens, and then we'll also get another sacrifice trigger off the Korvold when it attacks. Probably going to sacrifice a food token here. But yeah, killing the Soul Wardens is really important. Okay, Fatal Push is pretty sick here. So now we do have Push as kind of a backup against the Voice or Trelisara. The other nice thing about Fatal Push here is, the other nice thing about killing Soul Warden here, I mean, is that it also shuts them off the combo. If they went land Collected Company, they could potentially hit both Helioak and Scurryoak, which would essentially just win them the game, because we don't have a main deck way to beat the combo. Post sideboard we do have, oh well, they did have land company, so very glad we took out the Soul Wardens there. But we do have Maelstrom Pulse out of the sideboard, which does allow us to kill all of the Squirrel tokens, but we've only got a single copy of it, so. And yeah, killing the Soul Wardens there was very important, because they would have started triggering Trelisara as well. I mean, we do have the Fatal Push in hand, so it's not a huge deal, but yeah, getting Soul Warden off the board was huge there. Okay, so they attack him. We'll definitely block here. This is the nice thing about keeping Witness as a blocker. We exile the cards and they stay around till our next end step, so we still get to cast these during our turn. Okay, Double Priest is nice. Obviously we lose one of them, but that doesn't really matter. So we're definitely going to kill the Trelisara, because any creatures we put in play will trigger Authority, which would start putting counters on the Trelisara and allowing them to scry. So we have to kill that as the first priority here. Then I think we'll just get a Priest into play here. We definitely want that around for next turn, because we can just start using it to pick apart the opponent's board. We already have a lot of sacrifice fodder on the battlefield, so even though they're at a very high life total, the main thing here is just keeping their key cards off the board. Keeping their life gain enablers off the board is really important to stop them comboing and growing Voice of the Blessed and Trelisara. Since they have Authority and we're putting a lot of creatures into play off the Revels, I think it's also quite important to kill stuff like Voice of the Blessed or Trelisara immediately, which is why we obviously use Fatal Push that turn. Okay, wow, another Innkeeper's great here. Now we can just gain so much life that the only real way they're going to be able to force through lethal is with the combo. And they're missing all 3 pieces of the combo as well. That's another big reason why you want to get their life gain enablers out of play as quickly as possible, because you don't immediately lose to a very lucky Collected Company. You know, even if they hit Heliod, Scurryoak here, they don't have a life gain enabler to go infinite, which is really important. So I'm just going to get as many creatures into play as possible here, while they don't have a Voice of the Blessed or Trelisara in play, because we are giving them a ton of Authority triggers, but it's much better to do this now rather than potentially doing it after they put a Voice or Trelisara in play. So here it's very nice that we hit a Gilded Goose and a Fatal Push there, because now we have access to Fatal Push at instant speed. We have an untapped Gilded Goose without Summoning Sickness, so we can use it to sack the food that we've got to produce a black mana, and we can play Fatal Push with Revolt here, so I'm pretty confident that we're going to win this one now. I mean, we're way ahead on board anyway, but there was always an outside chance they could go like, you know, Soul Warden into Collected Company, into Heliod, Scurryoak, and having access to Fatal Push just shuts that off as an out as well. So if they Ranger Captain and they get Soul Warden out, so we're going to kill that as a priority again. They're completely out of cards now, so I'm pretty confident that we're going to be able to win this fairly easily now. So they attack with the Ranger Captain. We're at 18, so I'm just going to let that through. I'm not even going to block with the Unlucky Witness because we already have great stuff in hand. So we're just going to get Mayhem Devil in play here and just kill the Soul Warden. Wow, another Priest is sick. That's a good hit. So yeah, we're just going to activate Priest here. Use the Mayhem Devil to kill the Soul Warden and the Phantom, which will then force them to either sacrifice the Apparition or the Ranger Captain. And then I think, you know, if they sack, well, whichever one they sack, I think we're just going to then use Woe Strider to pick off the other untapped creature, and then we can just start attacking with everything and really putting the game out of reach fast. Gonna get the other Innkeeper in play here. Want to make sure that I hold open mana for Fatal Push though. You know, it would be really stupid to tap out here and then them get a lucky Collected Company. So I do want to hold up Fatal Push here, but I'm gonna get Innkeeper into play here. Gonna activate the Priest. What do we want to sacrifice here? I think I'm alright sacrificing one of the Innkeepers. We've already gained a ton of life off them. I want to keep the Gooses around just to be able to generate food, to give us more triggers for Mayhem Devil if we need. So make sure that we kill the Phantom first so that they don't gain any more life off it. Let's see what they sacrifice here. I mean, they're probably incentivized to sacrifice the either the tapped Ranger Captain or Skyclave Apparition here, because we need 3 pings to be able to take out the untapped Ranger Captain. Okay, so they do sack the Apparition here. So I think we'll just start pinging down the Ranger Captain. Okay, yeah. Okay, so Helioak, we definitely want Maelstrom Pulse. I'm going to bring in the Liberator there since we saw Authority. They could also run Ajani's Welcome, which is a card that's quite difficult for us to interact with otherwise. I'm going to trim Corvold and Revels since we're going second here. They're not the fastest cards, and since we're trimming a Corvold, I think we can probably trim an Innkeeper as well here. And I think I'm happy to run it back like that. You know, the great thing about this deck is you're basically pre-sideboarded against creature decks. You have, you know, Fatal Push, Priest, Mayhem Devil, all really, really strong cards against the creature decks. So most of the sideboard is for non-creature matchups. So matchups like this, you know, even though, you know, combo can be, well, is one of the more difficult matchups, but if it's creature-based combo, we have a much better chance because we can interact with what they're doing a lot easier. So we do have a turn 2 Revels here, which is sick, but the opponent is on a turn 1 Soul Warden, so we just gotta hope they don't have turn 2 Voice of the Blessed or Treadasara here. Okay, sick. Tap land. That's really lucky for us then, because I think, especially going Revels as well, we'd have a very hard time beating a Voice or Treadasara without Fatal Push here, because every creature we play with Revels in play is going to be putting 2 creatures in play. If we play Woe Strider, that's going to be putting 3 creatures in play. Okay, Heliod. Okay, interesting. So I think I want to go... I was going to just go Strider there, but like I said in the last game, getting Priest into play as quickly as possible is very important. Because it's just a card you want to start being able to activate as quickly as possible, especially against creature decks. So I'm going to run out Innkeeper first here and then Priest. Now this is going to trigger their Heliod a bunch of times, but it doesn't really bother me if their Soul Warden gets a bunch of +1/+1 counters on it, honestly, because we're going to be activating Priest next turn, ideally, unless they have a removal spell for it. And typically Soul Warden is a creature that they want to keep around, so them just making it bigger means that, you know, we can basically just kill it with the Priest eventually. That's the goal, and it's a ground creature as well, so it's going to be very difficult for them to attack past our chump blockers. We already have Gilded Goose and Unlucky Witness. Any other creatures we play off the Revels is going to... okay, they do have removal for the Priest, but yeah, it's going to be very difficult for them to attack past a wall of chump blockers with Warden, so I'm not that bothered about it. If they had a Voice of the Blessed with flying, that is a bit more disconcerting, but even then we have Gilded Goose that we can block with, so... Okay, interesting. So, we could go for Corvold here, or we could go for Priest. I think I like getting Priest into play. Again, like, both of the threats they have in play right now are threats that we want to be able to kill. You know, we'd be happy for them to sacrifice either of these, really. And so, again, they're both ground creatures, so we're not that bothered about them getting huge at the moment because we can just chump block them. But, yeah, getting Priest into play just allows us to gradually chip away, kill their creatures. And again, like I said, since they're ground creatures and we're getting a bunch of Unlucky Witnesses and Gilded Gooses into play, it doesn't really bother us that they're getting a bunch of +1/+1 counters that much. And then next turn we can go Korvold and then activate Priest to trigger Korvold and draw us a bunch of cards, hopefully find us a Fatal Push, and then hopefully that'll run the game out. Now again, there's the very scary thing here is that they could... Oh wow, okay, Ajani's pretty scary. They're very close to 35, which is kind of worrying, but the other thing is they could have won with Skyrioak at any point here. We didn't really have an out to that. We don't have Fatal Push or anything, so we basically just have to play it as if they don't have company and as if they don't have Skyrioak, and thankfully they didn't have either of them. The other great thing for us right now is that they only have one green land, so we don't really have to worry about this Scavenging Ooze at all. We can freely chump block because they're only going to be able to get one Ooze activation each turn. But yeah, we've been pretty lucky this game that they haven't had Skyrioak or Collected Company, because we don't really have... I mean, we do have Maelstrom Pulse as an out to the combo, but we need Maelstrom Pulse plus a way to kill Skyrioak or the Life Gain Enabler. So they attack with just the Ooze. We'll just block with the Witness here, hopefully draw us close to a Fatal Push. Now they've got an Ajani in play, we do need to try and deal damage to them, because if they get above 35 life and the Ajani's alive, we basically just lose the game. So we'll activate the Priest here. Okay, sick. We hit Mayhem Devil. That's a good start. So I think it's very important here that we kill this Soul Warden before it gains them much more life. So I think we'll go full control here and we'll try and kill the Soul Warden with the life gain triggers on the stack before they put the Heliod counters on. So I think we'll lead by... just counting this up quickly. I think we'll lead by activating the treasure token, and then we can start using Woe Strider to ping the Warden down. Oh wait, okay. I'm an idiot. I thought Mayhem Devil was in play. That was a punt. Okay, that was really stupid of me. So what I meant to do is I should have waited until now. Waited for them to put the Heliod triggers on the stack. I mean, thankfully they're targeting the Scavenging Ooze, which makes things easier for us. But yeah, that was a big punt on my part. I meant to wait until the Mayhem Devil was in play, then sacrifice the treasure to produce a Mayhem Devil trigger. I mean, thankfully it shouldn't end up mattering here because they've put all of the counters on the Scavenging Ooze. What I was worried about was that they would keep putting counters on the Soul Warden, which meant that it was out of range of Woe Strider. I mean, thankfully we can still kill the Soul Warden, but we're going to have to sacrifice an additional creature that we wouldn't have had to if I'd waited for Mayhem Devil to enter play before I sacrificed the treasure. That was my bad. Okay, Fatal Push, that's perfect. We'll definitely keep that one on top. So yeah, it is annoying. Had I waited until Mayhem Devil was in play to sacrifice the treasure, we would have got to keep this Priest in play. But I mean, we have another one in hand, so I don't think it's likely to lose us the game, hopefully. Fingers crossed. So we'll play this Priest here. Now they don't have Soul Warden in play, they're not going to gain any more life. And we can attack down the Ajani here. And the other thing is, oh, I guess it wouldn't have made a difference. If we'd have scryed first, we could have potentially scryed that Fatal Push to the top and then drawn it off the treasure. Which, yeah, so that was definitely a mistake on my part, but hopefully, I think we're still in a winning position here. Hopefully that hasn't ended up changing things too much. Had we not had that Priest in hand, this would have been a lot more sketchy. Okay, we're happy to let 9 damage through here. We're not that worried. We are worried about Collected Company a little bit, but not massively, I don't think. So I think I want to get Korvold in play here before we activate the Priest, just to start drawing a bunch of cards. I'm just trying to think the order and what I want to sacrifice off the Korvold, because I'd quite like to... I guess we'll wait and see what the creature we hit off it first is. Okay, another Devil, that's pretty sick. So, I'm just trying to think whether I want to sack the Goose or the food here. Probably want to sack the Goose to the Priest, so we probably just want to sack the food here instead. I don't really want to lose our land here because we've only got 5 lands in play, which isn't a ton. So we'll just start pinging face here. They can sack the... sorry, they can fire up their creature land to protect the ooze here, providing they don't have company anyway. If they do have company, that is a little bit annoying, but we'll have push to play off the priest mana. If they don't have company, I imagine they're going to fire up their creature land to try and protect the scavenging ooze here, in which case we can just fatal push the scavenging ooze afterwards anyway. We'll just have to see if they have collected company. If they do, we should be able to just kill whatever they hit with 2 Mayhem Devils in play. You know, we could just play Woe Strider off the priest activation and then start picking apart their board if they do have collected company. Let's see if they have it. Okay, they're obviously thinking about something. Okay, so they use Ooze to exile the Woe Strider, that makes sense. Okay, they do fire up the cave, so they don't have collected company, which is really good for us. Then we get 2 more devil triggers. And now, I think we'll just push now, and then, you know, we don't have to worry about them getting any more value off the exile. Now there is an argument to potentially holding on to Fatal Push in case because they could go Soul Warden into Collected Company, but I feel like letting an ooze live like that is kind of game losing. Well, not game losing, but it could, if they had another creature, then we might not be able to kill it with the priest. Yeah, I don't know, maybe it was actually, thinking about it, maybe it was a bit greedy to use the Fatal Push there, because we're so far ahead, our only real way to lose is if they go, like, Life Gain Enabler into Collected Company, into the combo, or Life Gain Enabler into Helioak. So maybe it was right to hold on to push there and try and kill their ooze with Priest this turn. I mean, either way it doesn't matter, we've definitely won this now, because we can just make Korvold pretty easily lethal. Okay, nice, yeah, we got there. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, this looks decent, you know, obviously quite a few lands, but we've got Unlucky Witness into Innkeeper and Strider as well, so I think this is a pretty reasonable keep. We've got Strider to dig if we do end up drawing more lands as well. Now we've got Mayhem Devil as well, which is great. So Temple Garden from the opponent could mean a number of things. We'll see what else they play here. Okay, Bant. Okay, we're against Angels. Oh wow, okay, that was a clutch draw, honestly. So, Giada is a card that you just have to kill immediately. If we let them untap here, they could very easily play like 2 2-drop Angels that would be like, you know, if they had, what's it called, 2 Youthful Valkyries, they would just be really, really big, really fast. So I think killing Giada on sight is really, really important there. Stops them ramping as well in case they have a 4-drop Angel potentially. Okay, Righteous Valkyrie, interesting. So, I think, trying to think whether we want to play Strider or Devil here. I think I like playing Devil first, and then we can play Strider next turn, or we can play Innkeeper into Strider, and when we sacrifice the treasure to play the Strider, we'll get a trigger off the Mayhem Devil, which is important, I think, because we really want to try and kill this Valkyrie here if we can, because, you know, they're getting gradually closer to 27, and if they hit that 27 life threshold and we don't have a Fatal Push, they're probably just going to be able to win here. So I wanted to play the Devil first there just so we can get an extra sacrifice trigger off the Innkeeper treasure here. So we'll lead on the Innkeeper, and I think we just need to kill the Valkyrie here. So we'll sacrifice the treasure to play the Woe Strider, which will put 2 more bodies in play, and then we can just start sacrificing our board to kill the Valkyrie here. And we gain a bunch of life in the process, which is nice at kind of stemming the bleeding from the attacks we're going to take in the air. So we'll sacrifice the token first. Definitely don't want Unlucky Witness. We basically just want to hit our 5th land to be able to play Korvold next turn. Sacrifice one of the Innkeepers, and then we'll definitely... Okay, sweet, there's a land for Korvold. And then we we would rather sack the Innkeepers than the Witness, because if we sack the Witness now, that land will get exiled and we won't have it for next turn. Plus we just lose out on the value of the Witness as well. No point in attacking here because they could double block the Devil, or just single block and then they just gain 2 life. Okay, Linvala. That's a little bit annoying because they can give their creatures either indestructible or hexproof, but since we have Korvold, we should hopefully be able to stonewall their attacks. Just trying to think what we want to sacrifice to the Korvold here. I think it's either, you know, could be a land potentially. You know, I don't love that, but if there's nothing better, we could sack the land. We could sack the Strider, but then we lose access to Strider plus Devil. Could sack the Witness, which, you know, is fine to do. We do lose the value off it, but if we didn't want to sack the land, that's also another consideration. I think we're going to lead on just attacking with the Woe Strider here, because we don't really mind, you know, we'd be happy for them to trade in combat. We don't want to lose the Devil here, you know. We wouldn't be happy, we wouldn't be unhappy at this moment in time to trade the Devil for the Linvala, but as the game goes on, especially with the Korvold in play, we might regret losing the Devil if we need to just be able to ping off creatures. Okay, sweet. So the Strider attack goes through, which is nice because it puts them further away from that 27 life threshold. And as things stand, I honestly don't mind sacking the Strider to Korvold. I'm still not 100% sure, but I don't know. I don't really like sacking lands with Korvold because you're going to be drawing a lot of cards. You want to have the mana to pay for it. And we're very close to being able to escape the Woe Strider as well, so if we did miss, or like, say they found a way to kill the Korvold, or we just drew lands, we can sacrifice another creature to the Korvold and then just escape the Woe Strider. So even though we do lose the Woe Strider, we have access to 2 more now if we did need to start sacrificing our board to trigger the Devil again. Wow, they shock in the Hallowed Fountain, so they need 6 mana for something. I have no idea what that is. Oh wow, they have March. Okay, that's pretty annoying. So we could. Oh wow, okay. I was going to say, I'm not sure whether we want to. Well, we don't have enough in the graveyard to be able to escape the Woe Strider, so we would have just had to play this one. We could have potentially sacked the Unlucky Witness to see what we hit, and then fill our graveyard for the escaped Strider next turn, and then we could start sacrificing our board to kill the opponent's stuff. But now we've drawn Priest, I think we're pretty incentivized to just play the Priest and use that alongside Devil to start picking apart their board next turn. Now we are taking 6 a turn in the air, which is pretty scary, but Priest plus Devil is a very effective way to start picking apart the opponent's board, especially in conjunction with Woe Strider. You know, as things stand, we could sack one of our creatures to deal 1 to Linvala, then use Priest. Oh wow, okay. Righteous Valkyrie is not great. But we can kill Linvala next turn at least, and then force them to sack something else. So we go down to 5 here. So this is pretty scary. That Valkyrie was not a great top deck for us. Hopefully we get a good draw here. Okay, sick. That was very good. So I think I'm going to start by sacking the Unlucky Witness to deal 1 damage to the Linvala here. We definitely want to kill that before anything else, because they have to sack the Linvala to give their other like, if we start pinging down other creatures, they can just sack the Linvala to give them hexproof or indestructible. So we have to go after the Linvala first here. Gilded Goose. I mean, I think we do want that, right? We just want extra blockers in the air to stabilize us here. We're definitely winning the long game, so as long as we can stabilize and they don't just kill us. And Gilded Goose just gives us another blocker in the air. So we'll sacrifice the Strider and the token here. Use the 2 Devil pings to take out the Linvala. I presume they sacrifice in response to this one, and probably give their creatures indestructible, I'd imagine. Just to stop us attacking. I mean, we don't have good attacks anyway because of the Valkyrie. I guess it doesn't really matter which they pick here. And then we can go for... Now, we did exile the Mayhem Devil, but I think it's just worth getting Korvold into play here, honestly. So we probably lose out on the Devil, but we're much better off stabilising by going Goose, and then we can play Corvold and sacrifice the food to the Corvold. And now we have Gilded Goose as an extra blocker in the air, so even if they top deck like another March of Otherworldly Light, we still have Goose as a way to block, and then we can start forcing them to sack again with Priest next turn. So like this position is pretty good now. I think we can escape Woe Strider even if we don't draw anything great. Okay, Bishop of Wings, that's fine. Like, I just needed them to not draw another good flyer or like a Collected Company there. Okay, interesting. So, could play the Unlucky Witness, but I like going for Woe Strider here because we don't really want to sack this Gilded Goose if we can avoid it. I think the way we lose here is if we sack the Gilded Goose and they find a way to kill the Corvold. So we're going to escape the Woe Strider so that we can sacrifice the Strider and the Goat and get to keep this Gilded Goose alive, which is nice. We can't force them to you know, we can't pick off anything here with the Devil Triggers, so we're just going to go face, keep them away from that 27 life threshold. I assume they sack the Angel of Unity here, which will give them another token, but we can then... I'm just trying to think whether we want to attack with Corvold. We probably do, right, because we can attack with Corvold, sacrifice probably a land here, I'd imagine. I'm just trying to think what we want to do with the Priest mana. I think we probably just want to put Gigantha in hand with the mana we have here, just not to waste it. We can't play Revels. We don't really want to shock a land in here if we can avoid it, because we are at a fairly low life total. You know, this game is just coming down to not punting. We need to be thinking how we're going to lose this game. That's my mindset at the moment. And that's why it was very important for me to keep this Gilded Goose alive, because if we sack the Gilded Goose there and we don't escape the Woe Strider, which is probably the greedy play, they could very well have a way to kill the Woe Strider, sorry, to kill the Gilded Goose and then just start attacking in the air. So I think I'm happy to sack a land now. We have more than enough mana. We can use the Mayhem Devil to take down the Spirit token. We're attacking in for 8 here, so the only way they could potentially win this now is if they can both kill Gilded Goose and make Righteous Valkyrie 5 power. Okay, Inquisitor Captain, I mean, that's not a bad draw. Let's see what else they hit here. Okay, nice. So this matchup... Again, we're kind of pre-boarded against creatures. I think we just want to bring Maelstrom Pulse here as just an additional bit of removal. I'm just trying to think if we want anything else. Liberator, there's nothing that we really want to hit. Yeah, I think we'll just run it back like that. Like, out of all the creature decks, this is one of the ones that is probably most scary because their creatures are pretty good against Mayhem Devil because they have such high toughness for the most part. And they're very good at gaining life, so we can't just steal games by pinging the opponent with Mayhem Devil triggers. We have to, like, outgrind the opponent to win this one, but in general, as long as they don't have a crazy fast start with Giada or something, I think we're probably the favourites in this matchup. Maybe not going second, but I think overall we probably are. Okay, nice. This hand looks pretty good, you know. We'd love to see Fatal Push to stop those crazy fast Giada starts, but... we got turn 2 Revels here, which is always good, so going to lead on the Gilded Goose here, and then we can go Revels on 2, and then either Strider or Devil on 3. The slightly annoying thing about this is we can be kind of slow to interact if we don't draw Fatal Push, because for Devil and Strider to be good, we kind of need both on the battlefield at the same time. But hopefully we should have enough time here. Okay, interesting. Maelstrom Pulse. So, I think we just want to play the Revels here. Although, I mean, maybe we should have Maelstrom Pulse there instead. Because... I mean, there's nothing... Actually, I don't know, yeah. I think we probably should have played Maelstrom Pulse there. Okay, they go for a Splendid Angel. Interesting. I was thinking if we get Revels out, it just speeds our hand up so much, but... that Bishop of Wings is a real problem. I think we should have played Maelstrom Pulse last turn because I think they don't have Righteous Valkyrie. If they had Righteous Valkyrie, they surely would have played Valkyrie first to then trigger Resplendent Angel and Valkyrie next turn, but even if they don't have Valkyrie, they could very well have Collected Company, and if they have Bishop of Wings in play with Collected Company, they're very easily going to be able to trigger the Resplendent Angel. So I think we have to kill the Bishop of Wings here, and I think we should have killed it last turn as well, because now all they need is to gain 3 life somehow with Valkyrie, and they're above that 27 life threshold. So since we're killing the Bishop of Wings now, we should have just done that last turn and they wouldn't have gained that 4 life. They would have still been at 20. So yeah, I think that was a misplay on my part. I think I just got too caught up in just wanting to get Revels out on turn 2. Which I think is fine in most matchups, but here they can... You know, the matches where Angels beat Sacrifice is where they kind of pop off with very fast starts, getting Valkyrie above 27 life quickly or getting Giada in play. Wow, Archon of Emiria, that's not something I expected to see. I mean, Archon isn't particularly great against our deck. I mean, we do obviously double spell in turns sometimes, but... yeah, I'm kind of surprised to see that. I mean, thankfully we do have blockers in the air here, which should be able to stabilise us, hopefully. Because that's the thing, as long as we set our engine pieces up, we should be good here. As long as we can keep them below 27 life. Oh wow, Collected Company, that is pretty scary. Wow, okay, Bishop of Wings, so that puts them above... wow, okay, that puts them above 27 and they gain the token. Okay, so that's a bit unfortunate, and I think that did end up mattering. Had we Maelstrom Pulsed on turn 2 there, they would have been at 26 life, so while they would have gotten the... actually, no, that wouldn't have made a difference, because they would have been at 26, and then they would have still gained 8 life, and they would have got a token off the Resplendent Angel and gone over 27, so didn't end up mattering, but I think I did misplay. I should have just Maelstrom Pulsed on turn 2, kill the Bishop of Wings immediately. That was my bad. This hand, again, we've got turn 2 Revels, but we've actually got a Fatal Push this time, so I'm much happier with this hand. Fatal Push is going to slow their starts down significantly, you know. Like I said, the main way we have of interacting outside of Push is Devil plus Strider or Devil plus Priest, and they can be a little slow to set up, and the very fast starts from Angels all involve Bishop of Wings or Giada, and Fatal Push is just a clean answer to both of those, which is great. So we get to play the Revels on turn 2, which is definitely the right play this game. And yeah, I really like this spot now. Like on the play, turn 2 Revels, we can get Strider and Devil online on turn 4. We also have Fatal Push as a backup, so much more optimistic about this game. Okay, Angel of Unity, so the annoying thing there would be if they played a Giada, we would have had to play Fatal Push, which would have been very mana inefficient, but Angel of Unity we don't really care about at all, so we can start playing our creatures out here, which is really nice. I'm going to lead on Strider here just because I don't want to give them a good target for Apparition. Because if they have Skyclave Apparition, I'm pretty confident that they'll just take out the Devils straight away, whereas they might not be as incentivized to kill the Woe Strider here. Okay, so they attack with Angel of Unity. We'll just obviously block here. They just want to gain a life. Just trying to think whether we want to push the Archon now. I don't think we do. I think I'm going to lead on... oh, what we should have... oh, Priest is a nice set. Yeah, I should have waited until... after attacking to see if they make the trade here before playing our land for turn, but shouldn't end up mattering. I'm just going to pass the turn here. You know, again, we're not too worried about Archon right now because we've got Revels in place, so we're getting ahead on tempo, just playing 1 spell a turn anyway. We can play Fatal Push at instant speed, and Archon is actually restricting them during their turn, so I'd rather wait until the end of their turn if we are going to fire off the Fatal Push. Plus, we get an extra ping off the Mayhem Devil now when we sacrifice our food if we do play the Fatal Push, so... okay, they pass, so they've obviously got Collected Company here. I think we'll just lead on the Priest. We kind of have to sacrifice... we want to trigger the Mayhem Devil first so that we can kill one of these creatures off the Priest to force them to sacrifice the other. So we'll lead by just making a black mana off the Gilded Goose here, and then we'll sack the Goat and the Gilded Goose, get 2 Mayhem Devil triggers to kill the Archon. And now I assume they'll company in response. Well, they don't have company. That is a surprise. Wow, we drew Corvold as well. So what could they have that they didn't... maybe interaction? But, like, Arena's passing priority. They must just... I don't know, I'm really confused. I think we'll sacrifice the Unlucky Witness here. Just because I don't think we've played a land yet. Okay, nice, we got there. Okay, so we're going second here. And can't keep a one-lander. Wow, another one-lander. Okay, this looks more reasonable. Just trying to think what we want to keep here. Definitely want the 2 lands. Definitely want Goose and Priest. Probably want Strider as well. So I think we're just going to put back Unlucky Witness and Innkeeper here. And this, even, you know, since we're going second, I want to have a fast way to interact if the opponent's on a creature deck. Okay, which it looks like they are. So white-black Esper Sentinel probably makes me think either humans or Esper Greasefang maybe. Devil's a great draw here as well. Okay, Hallowed Blade. So they're definitely on Greasefang here, which is good to know. Potentially the same list that I posted a few weeks back. Most people who are playing that seem to just be playing that 75, which is nice to know because I think we can kind of confidently predict that they're not going to have any interaction game 1. I mean, maybe that's a risky assumption to make, but if most people that I've seen are playing that 75 and they don't have, you know, they've got Heartless Act and what do you call it? Fragment Reality in the sideboard. Okay, interesting. So we're definitely going to activate Priest here. I think we're going to lead on Devil. Drawing Fatal Push here is nice. So I'm going to activate the Goose first. I mean, I'm just trying to think what we could draw. If we go red, we could potentially draw Mayhem Devil or Unlucky Witness. But if we go green, we have a lot of other cards that we could draw, like Gilded Goose, Prosperous Innkeeper as well, for example. So we're going to activate the Goose to kill the Esper Sentinel here. We'll activate the Priest, and we'll do 1 target at the Hallowed Blade, 1 target at face to force them to discard something. Now, that they will get a trigger off the Diviner of Fates, but they might have a really stacked hand. They wouldn't want to discard anything. Oh, wow, they discard Inquisitor Captain. So they do get another replacement card, but not a huge deal. I assume they just sacked the Hallowed Blade here. Oh, we did draw the Unlucky Witness. That's kind of unfortunate. So, we could Fatal Push the Diviner of Fates right now, which is pretty appealing. They don't have Parhelion in the graveyard, so we don't have to worry about Greasefang immediately. If they discarded Parhelion to the Hallowed Blade, I think we have to hold on to Fatal Push to be able to kill Greasefang, but I think it's kind of a waste mana-wise to not play the Strider. Leaving Diviner of Fates alive is a bit concerning, but they don't have a ton of ways they can capitalise on Diviner this turn unless they happen to have Rafine, so I think holding on to Fatal Push is fine. And in general, against this deck, I would rather hold on to Fatal Push if I can to be able to kill Greasefang or something else at instant speed. Okay, so they do have the Rafine, which is kind of annoying, because now they can get immediate value off the Diviner. But again, it's not a huge deal. Well, they discard Greasefang, so they must not have Parhelion for them to do that. So here we get to kill one of their creatures again, which is really nice. Okay, interesting. So Goose is a nice draw. It gives us a blocker in the air. I think I'm just going to play the Unlucky Witness and sack it, because we haven't drawn our land for turn yet. It would be nice to hit a land off Unlucky Witness if we can. Okay, nice, we do. See what they sacrifice here. Wow, they sack the Rafine. Interesting. Okay, we draw Revels, so we're definitely going to be playing the Overgrown Tomb because we don't have red mana to cast the Unlucky Witness. And I think I'm fine for Fatal Pushing now. They discarded a Greasefang. They don't have Parhelion in the graveyard, so I'm pretty confident overall that they're not going to suddenly combo me out of nowhere. Shock the land in to play Goose, and then we can play Gigantha as well. Or, sorry, put Gigantha into our hand. And then I'll just attack with the Strider here. Okay, there is Greasefang. So, I mean, they could have always had, like, land, Ledger Shredder, play Greasefang, discard, what do you call it? Discard Parhelion, but we'd have had, that's, like, such a specific sequence they'd have needed to have. So I think, I'm just trying to think whether we play Korvold first. I quite like playing Korvold first because we get a ton of triggers off it when we activate Priest. So I think we'll unfortunately have to sacrifice a land here, which will put us down to 3 lands, but we should draw another land if we don't get very unlucky here. And then we can sack the Strider and the Gilded Goose to force them to sack presumably the Esper Sentinel, and then Korvold will go up to a 7/7. So even if they do have the combo, we survive just about. Okay, and I think I'm happy going for Fatal Push here because, you know, they could very well draw Parhelion and a way to discard it. Okay, nice. Yeah, we got there. So it does always kind of feel like walking on eggshells playing against this deck because of the combo. So we'll definitely be bringing in the Graveyard Hate here. I like 3 pieces of Graveyard Hate. It's not too much because the obvious downside of it is they can have hands where the Graveyard Hate does nothing, but Hearse is just a generically good card because we can turn it into a big creature later in the game, and Lantern synergizes with both Devil and Corvold, so I don't mind bringing them in here. Just trying to think whether we want Pulse as additional interaction. Probably do. And then I think we can just trim Corvold, Revels, especially going second. Maybe we want 2 Revels down going second, actually, because that is quite a big tempo loss. And since we're trimming on the Corvold, I think we can trim on Innkeeper as well. I think I'm happy to run it back like that. Yeah, thinking about it, I do like Maelstrom Pulse quite a lot. Like, they could, you know, it does get taxed by Thalia and Sentinel, but having just clean removal for stuff is very important. Okay, I think I'm happy to keep this. Could be a little bit slow, but it's just a solid hand. Unless the opponent has, like, the nuts, we should be in with a shout this game anyway. Okay, so they're on a mult of 5, which is obviously good news for us. And nothing on turn 1. No Sentinel, which is great. Okay, so they have Hallowblade on turn 2. Which, I mean, as long as they don't discard Parhelion into Greasefang, should be manageable here. Because we can either go Strider or Revels next turn. We could go Strider to force them to sack a creature. Interesting. So I think I like going Strider here, just getting rid of that Hallowblade, because they're stuck on 2 lands by the looks of things. I would rather start getting value off the Priest now, force them to start sacking stuff. I feel like it's maybe a bit greedy going for Revels. Okay, so they do have Heartless Act for the Priest, which is a little bit annoying. But my thought process is if they don't have a way to kill it, we can just take out the Hallowblade and draw a card. Even if we don't draw anything great, we can just play Revels into Corvold, which is going to be difficult for them to beat. Okay, I'm not really... like I said, even if we draw lands, we have Revels into Corvold, which is really sick. So I like keeping the Goat around as a blocker here, just to soak up some damage. I don't think we get that much value off scrying with the Strider there, really. Okay, so opponent attacks. I think I'm happy to let this through now. I'd rather keep it back in case they play like a Rafine to try and buff it. Okay, Witness is nice because now we can go Revels into Witness and then we can play Corvold next turn. Obviously them getting stuck on 2 lands has been great for us this game, but I still think we would have been in with a shout because Revels into Corvold is such a powerful sequence. Assuming they don't have the combo anyway. Oh wow, they just never saw the 3rd land drop. That's unlucky. We'll take it though. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, this looks decent. You know, we got Witness and Priest and Devil plus Push. So if we're against a creature deck, this is a really strong start. Okay, so opponent's on a mult of 6. Mountain, I mean, that's probably a good sign. That's probably going to be a creature deck, I'd imagine. So we'll lead on the Witness here. Definitely get Priest down on turn 2. Wily Goblin. Okay, so we're against Goblins here, which I think in general is a pretty good matchup. Obviously, Muxus is the scariest card, but... and I guess Wily Goblin, they are getting fairly close to it, but having played a ton of Goblins in the past, I know they're particularly weak to this style of sacrifice with Mayhem, Devil and Priest, so... okay, hitting the 3rd land drop was really clutch there. We could go Devil here and start pinging down their stuff, but I think I quite like just going Witness, activating the Priest here, forcing them to sack the Wily Goblin. Well, we might as well attack with the Witness if we're going to sacrifice it. Then sacrifice these 2, we get 4 looks from the top of our deck, and we have Fatal Push to kill the Chieftain as well, which is nice. Okay, so we got Strider and the Goose here, which is nice. So, I think we will play Strider and a Blood Crypt instead of the Gilded Goose here. and then we can just Fatal Push this Chieftain. I think we want to do it now. We could do it during their turn, but we would have to sacrifice the goat token to trigger Revolt, so I think we're much better off just doing it now, because we don't want them being able to go Chieftain into Krenko. Okay, so they do have Snoop. Yikes, Muxus on top. So they didn't draw a land. Okay, so that means that they don't have a land for Muxus next turn, which is good to know. Either way, we definitely want to take out Snoops here, because they could very easily get lucky. You know, if they hit a Krenko off the top with 2 Snoops in play, that's going to just instantly lose us the game. So we definitely want to take out these Snoops as quickly as possible here. So we'll play the Devil, sack the Strider and the Goat token, we'll deal 2 to Snoop, force them to sack the other one, get in for an extra point of damage here, and then unfortunately, because these marshes enter tapped, we can't play the Innkeeper here, but we can just play the Swamp and put Gigantha into our hand. So we know they don't have a land for turn, so just trying to figure out what else they have. Well, they didn't play anything. Maybe they have another Muxus in hand? So we just have to try and close this game out as quickly as possible here then, I think. So, I'm going to lead on Corvold here. It looks like they have priority for something, so maybe they don't, maybe they have an instant in hand, but I'm trying to think what instant Goblins would main deck. You know, had they not got priority there, I would just assume that they have a second Muxus in hand, because I can't think of anything else in Goblins that they just wouldn't want to play with 5 mana available. So just gotta hope they don't hit a land drop here. Even if they do, unless they get an insane... Okay, sweet. I was going to say, unless they get an insane Muxus hit, we potentially could just win with Corvold the following turn anyway. Sideboarding here, definitely want an extra bit of interaction off Maelstrom Pulse. Again, we're pretty well, you know, we're basically pre-sideboarded against creature decks, so I think I'm just going to trim a Corvold here. And I'm not really sure we want anything else. You know, we could bring in Liberator if we know they're bringing in Herald's Horn or something, but I don't think that's worth it, because I think in Goblins you're probably better off playing 3-mana Chandra, especially if you're playing mono red. So there's no point pre-sideboarding Liberator if we don't know. You know, if we see Herald's Horn, then I could potentially see bringing in Liberator if it goes to a game 3, but our main deck is just pretty well set up against their deck anyway, so we'll definitely go Goose on turn 1 here. Bit annoying that we drew another land. You know, we already have enough lands, just want to draw gas other than that now. Okay, so they play Wily Goblin on 2. Revels is nice, but I think we just need to get Priest in play. You know, you almost always just want to play Priest on turn 2, especially against a creature deck. Yeah, see, if we hadn't played Priest on turn 2, we wouldn't have been able to activate it here, which seems very important to be able to do. Wow, another land isn't great here. So, I think I'm gonna... I'm just trying to think if there was a way for us to activate Priest and play Revels in the same turn. I think I missequenced there. I think I should have played the Devil first and then cracked the Gilded Goose food token. Oh wow, okay, Corvold is nice. So, we did miss out on a point of damage there because I missequenced. I thought there might have been a way for us to play Revels off the Priest activation, but there wasn't. Hopefully that doesn't end up costing us the game though. Okay, so this is pretty scary. We have flooded out quite a bit, so we just need them to not have Muxus here. If they have Muxus, they're probably going to win. If they don't, we've got a pretty good chance, because we can go Corvold with Revels next turn, which is pretty sick. Okay, so they don't have Muxus. That's huge. We've got a good chance now then. They don't have any... Maybe they've just got a land in hand? I think if they had any other Goblin, they probably would have just used that last turn. So we'll just play the Corvold here. Innkeeper's a great hit, because now we can just sacrifice the treasure to the Corvold. You don't have to sack a land or anything. We want to keep... You know, we could have sacked Innkeeper or whatever other creature, but we want to keep creatures in play to sack to Priest. And activating Priest with a Corvold in play is just insane. Wow, nothing. They must just have lands in hand. I can't think of anything else they could have that they wouldn't play there. So I'm going to lead on the Gigantha here just to hit something potentially good off the Revels. Wow, okay, Strider is a very nice hit. Because now we can just activate the priest, force them to sack the wily goblin, and we just draw an insane amount of cards off the core vault here. Okay, nice. Fatal push as well. So they sack the wily goblin. Now we can just play priest and fatal push here. I think playing fatal push is fine. It's not too greedy because War Chief is a card that we want to kill anyway. You know, stops them giving Krenko haste, stops them giving Muxus and all the hits off it haste. So I'll attack and then I'll just fatal push before blocks, just to see what we hit. Okay, yeah, we'll just fatal push here, get in for 9, and then even if they draw Muxus here, they would need a very, very strong hit to win the game. And they would need to win the game this turn because we're just going to attack with Corvold anyway. Wow, okay, nice, we got there. Okay, sweet, so we're going first here. And yeah, this looks decent. You know, we've got Priest on 2, either Revels or Devil on 3, probably Revels. And then we can go Devil the following turn, get 2 creatures into play, which we could then use to sack to Priest. But yeah, on the play, I really like the look of this hand. On the draw, you know, without Fatal Push, if the opponent's on a creature deck, having to wait until turn 3 to activate Priest might be a little slow, but alongside Devil, it's pretty good. But yeah, on the play, this hand is sick. Especially because we can potentially use Priest to ramp into Corvold as well. So Innkeeper's a nice draw, but we're just going to slam the Priest here. You almost always want to just get Priest into play as quickly as possible. So Godless Shrine from the opponent could be a number of things. Interesting. So we'll just attack here and then just play Revels. Without the opponent committing anything to the board, I think just getting Revels down is much better than Mayhem Devil, because then we just get value. You know, we're just flooding the board with creatures way faster. If they do play a creature here, we can, you know, we have multiple ways to deal with it. Okay, Diviner of Fates. So, okay, I was going to say I guess Greasefang, but that's pretty obvious what it is. So I think here we want to ensure that we always have Fatal Push with Revolt up. And so Innkeeper is really nice because it gives us a treasure token that we can sacrifice at any point in order to trigger Revolt and pay for Fatal Push. Okay, we'd really like to draw a red land here. If we draw a red land, okay, perfect. Now we can play Mayhem Devil and still keep up the treasure for Fatal Push. So like I said, they've pitched Parhelion, so holding up Fatal Push is like really, really important at all times. So this treasure is never going to get sacrificed this whole game, basically. Like, I'm going to keep that up to kill Greasefang, because that's the only real way from this point that we're going to lose this game anyway, I think. Okay, so they have Esper Sentinel. Not really an issue. Obviously it does tax the Fatal Push, but... And again, if they're playing the same build that I posted, then they're not going to have any interaction in the main deck, which is good to know. But again, you know, kind of a risky assumption because people can easily make changes. Okay, they discard a Ledger Shredder, presumably to dig for Greasefang. Wow, another Devil. Okay, that's not a bad draw. I think we just want to get Corvold into play here, just start closing the game out as quickly as possible. See what we hit. Okay, we hit another Goose, so we can just sacrifice a food to the Corvold here. Trigger the Mayhem Devil to deal the damage to the Esper Sentinel. And now we can... I think we're going to sacrifice a food to produce a red mana. Again, we don't want to lose the treasure token because we want to keep Fatal Push up. And then we can sacrifice both of the Gilded Gooses to Priest here. Force them to sack the Diviner of Fates, and then we can play another Devil. And we're drawing a ton of cards off Corvold as well. Force them to sack the Diviner of Fates, get another Mayhem Devil ping. And yeah, we'll just play the Devil here. We still have mana up for Fatal Push after we do that. I'm just trying to think. We can't really play around it anyway. I was thinking if we had a land available, We're so far ahead this game that we could potentially lose to Thalia into Greasefang. If they play Thalia into Greasefang, then this single treasure isn't good enough to pay for Fatal Push, but we don't have any lands. You know, if we hadn't spent that mana, we would have lost it anyway. Okay, it didn't end up mattering, but you know, when you're that far ahead, it's always worth thinking about the worst case scenario. So here we definitely want Graveyard Hate, we definitely want the Maelstrom Pulse, and we'll trim on Corvold, Revels, and Innkeeper. Again, going second, I think we can afford to trim 2 Revels because it is a pretty big tempo loss, and we don't really want to be drawing it in multiples going second either, so... But yeah, overall I think this matchup, as long as you play carefully and you know what threats to focus on taking out, I think this matchup is fairly favoured towards us anyway. But again, you know, them having a fast combo kill, unless we have Graveyard Hate, is very difficult for us to stop. Again, we have Fatal Push though, so we do have a lot of ways to stop it, but they also have a decent fair game plan. You know, it's very possible that their starting hand lines up pretty well against what we're doing, so we'll just see how it goes here. So this hand, you know, it's quite fast, but it is pretty reliant on Priest, so we could get blown out here if they have removal for the Priest, but if they don't, we can start filtering through our deck pretty nicely. Okay, they have Shredder on 2. Oh, Fatal Push is a good draw, I'm happy to see that. And we want to ensure that we don't ever trigger this Ledger Shredder if we can avoid it. Getting them a free Connive, especially if Shredder is their only source of discarding, is a recipe for disaster. So we're going to try and go out of our way to not trigger this Ledger Shredder if possible. Okay, that's unfortunate, because this hand was pretty reliant on Priest. So now we're... Okay, I mean, Woe Stride is not a bad draw here. I was going to say, without that, we're kind of running on empty a little bit with just Innkeepers and Gilded Goose. But Stride is nice, can help us scry to good stuff on the top of our deck. And we still have access to Fatal Push as well. You know, if they went like Esper Sentinel into Greasefang, discard Parhelion, we can still kill their creature. So do we want to kill the Shredder here? Probably, I think it's too greedy. I think we want to hold on to Fatal Push for Greasefang if possible. We could have killed the Shredder there. Okay, they didn't pitch a Parhelion, which is a very good sign. So I'm going to set a stop during the upkeep, and I'm going to scry during the upkeep, because I want to take out Rafine here, if possible. So I'm going to scry before I draw, because I want to trigger Revolt anyway for Fatal Push, and it will just help us draw something good. Oh, okay, that's nice. So I think rather than going for Fatal Push, even though we've triggered Revolt now, I want to just go for Corvold, because they obviously don't have Parhelion in hand, or they're unlikely to have Parhelion in hand anyway, so I'm pretty happy to go for Corvold now. If they're running my build that I posted, their only interaction is going to be Fragment Reality and Heartless Act. Getting Corvold into play while they're tapped out means that Heartless Act no longer kills it. And Fragment Reality is pretty bad for them to use on Corvold as well, because it will just give, you know, potentially give us a 3-drop. Wow, they're attacking here. I mean, the only possible things I could think of are they're desperate and they need to draw. They have Heartless Act. Oh, okay, maybe they just want to pitch Parhelion into the graveyard. So I'm going to block here. They could have Heartless Act to keep the Rafine alive. They could have Iganjo, but that's a one-of, and I don't want to let them getting in for free attacks. I think it'd be pretty unlikely for them to have that. Plus, I think just not blocking, they're just going to start getting so much value, and it's possible that Rafine could eventually outscale the Corvold. Oh wow, they do have Iganjo. Okay, that is unfortunate. Maybe I shouldn't have blocked there, but that's a one-of in the deck, and they could have very well just not had... Wow, and Apparition as well. Okay, that kind of sucks. So that was a very bad turn for us, but again, I think in the same spot I would have made the same play, because Iganjo is a one-of, and yeah, unfortunately I think we're going to have to double spell here. which will trigger the Ledger Shredder. But yeah, like I said, Igando is a one of, and if they were just doing that out of desperation and we didn't block the Rafine, that's, you know, giving them potential to attack again and turn Rafine into like a 4/7, which could start outscaling Korvold. So the reason I double spelled there is because we have Fatal Push in hand, they have Parhelion in graveyard, so we want to have the treasure to be able to kill Greasefang at instant speed, but we also want to get Mayhem Devil in play. So even though we've said that we want to keep Fatal Push for Greasefang, I think if they had Greasefang they would have played it this turn, and activating Fatal Push now just puts us so far ahead. Well, not so far ahead, but like from where we were, it completely resets the board. So now we have like 7 power in play. They don't have Greasefang because they would have played it last turn, and now our clock is way faster. We're now on the front foot, so even though ideally we want to save Fatal Push for Greasefang, I think at that point it was worth going for. Okay, nice. Yeah, we got there. Sweet, and back to rank 1. Nice.